Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 8th of May of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And the most important update is that the Russians during the previous 24 hours conducted massive missile strike all over the entire territory of Ukraine. The Russians were using the Ha-101 missile, Ha-555, the Russians were using Caliber missiles, the Russians were using Kinzhal, and of course the Russians were using drones. So as you can see in front of your screen, the map and the geography of Russian strikes, and as you can see, there were no specific area that the Russians were attacking. We see the concentration in the western part, in the central part, in the eastern part. Maybe the Russians haven't attacked the southern part, but mainly because of the fact that most of the southern part is already under Russian control. So the sources reported that the main strikes took place in the vicinity of the energy facilities and so on. We haven't received almost nothing about those strikes. The only thing we have is this video. According to the author of this video, the Russians destroyed and damaged the Ladyshska thermal power plant, and this is the explosion and the consequences of those attacks. If we zoom in better, we're going to see the power plant. This is it. So another minus in Ukrainian energy facilities and the Ukrainian energy production. So, and the second evidence of a very heavy, let's say, consequences of Russian strike is that today the Ukrainian Energy Government Office reported that from 6 p.m. till 11 p.m. of the local time, the Ukrainians will turn off electricity almost through the entire Ukraine. So this is probably the most important evidence that the Russians most likely managed to achieve significant results. But of course, the Ukrainians from their side continue stating that they managed to bring down up to 90% of missiles that the Russians were using. So we see that the results and the consequences completely doesn't correlate with the Ukraine air defense system work. Now we are moving to the situation on the ground. We continue receiving a lot of updates from Kherson direction, and the most important updates are coming from Krynki, Kazachie, Lahiri area. We got, as you can see, additional videos of how the Ukrainians are bombing, attacking and hunting the Russians. Of course, when talking just about 8th of May, it's very difficult to understand based on 5 geolocations about the Ukrainian pressure. But if we increase the numbers of updates just since the beginning of months, we're going to see complete superiority from the Ukrainian side. Hundreds of drones, hundreds of artillery strikes and so on, and it's not just an attempt to hunt the poor Russian soldiers who are walking from one ruins to another. This is obviously the preparation before full-scale offensive operation from the Ukrainian side, and most likely this operation is going to start very soon. The Russians, of course, try to prevent any attacks from the Ukrainian side. They try to attack the concentration of Ukrainian forces on the Ukrainian bank of the river, but most likely the measures and the things that the Russians are doing are not enough to force to slow down the Ukrainians, because we see the concentration of Ukrainian fire. Maybe it's just attempts to force the Russians to think that Ukrainians are going to do this and to slow down the Russians in Kharkiv direction, but something tells me that this is going to be a real attack from the Ukrainian side. Now we're moving to Zaporozhye direction. We're going to talk about Robotyne once again. The Russians continue pushing. We see that there is just 20% of Robotyne still in the gray zone. Today we got just one video of how the Russians were bombing this territory, the gray zone. Most likely the video either is old, or maybe the Ukrainians still have possibilities to send some reconnaissance or sabotage groups with the purpose to capture some Russian soldiers to get some useful information or something like this. But when talking about the Russian focus, real Russian focus, we can see that the main Russian focus currently is laying on the north, on the northwest, and on the north, northeast, and the east of village. No focus inside, just around. So the Russians are bombing the Ukrainians who are currently located not inside of Robotyne but around Robotyne, which is also we can use it as an evidence that there is no more Ukrainians in the area. Now we are moving further to the east in direction of the Vremivka tactical bridgehead, where we will receive significant number of updates, and the most important is that the Russians, according to different reliable mappers, as a result of offensive operation, a series of offensive operations managed to force the Ukrainians to fall back, and the Russians captured the hills to the west of Staromayorsk. If we summarize everything, according to different reliable mappers, this is approximately the current control of the armed forces of Russian Federation on Staromayorsk direction. So the Russians established control over the hills, and the Russians also managed to enter the first streets and the first buildings inside of the village. Significant progress, very difficult to understand how the Russians managed to achieve such results. Most likely the Ukrainians decided to fall back without showing any resistance or any pressure on Russian forces, because the Ukrainians understand that most likely they will also be forced to fall back from Urozhaina. It's very difficult to hold the territory under the Russian pressure, so this is the only smart decision the Ukrainians could do. When talking about Urozhaina itself, as you can see, also a lot of geolocations, still no confirmations whether the Russians managed to establish complete control over the southern farms or not. The Ukrainians tried to hold the area, tried to stabilize, probably just to win some time before they finish the evacuation of Staromayorsk and Urozhaina as well. After that, the Ukrainians will abandon their positions here either. We have additional multiple launch rocket strikes, artillery strikes, Krasnohorivka strikes, FAB arrivals, and so on. So the Ukrainians are under very heavy pressure. And we also got one very interesting and very cool video from direction where the Russians published that video. Let's take a look at the video. Today the sources published the video of a single tank Russian attack, or not tank, maybe turtle tank, completely heavy armored or something like this. And if you take a look at this video, you're gonna see that the Russians have bypassed almost half of Urozhaina without any problems. The Ukrainians were trying to slow the Russians down, but we see that they couldn't do this, couldn't do anything. And some mappers and some people decided to, or advanced me to change the map based on the video. If we return back on map, the Russian tank or Russian turtle tank, total armored vehicle, was moving something like this. So the Russians have almost reached the central part of the village, but when watch the video in details, we're gonna see lots of very interesting things. So the Russians were moving something like this, and when the Russians reached this line, it's unknown what exactly happened there. Maybe the Russians turned back, or let's say moving to the east or to the west and then back to farm. So maybe the Russians moved the same way back. It's unknown. The only thing that we would like to discuss with you is the number of Ukrainian forces that are currently located in the south in Urozhaina. Let's take a look at this armored vehicle once again, and let's count the grenade launchers. The first grenade launcher tried to attack the Russian tank, but without any results. Then in a second there was a second grenade launcher. This is it. And this is the second grenade launcher. The second one also missed, no damage to the Russian tank or Russian turtle tank. Few seconds later, third grenade launcher, and in the beginning, at the end of the road, fourth grenade launcher. So we see that Ukrainians have concentrated significant number of forces exactly in this part of Urozhaina, and with significant number of anti-tank missiles and anti-tank equipment. So as I understand, based on this video, I made the conclusion that most likely the Russians were conducting reconnaissance in force or reconnaissance in combat, trying to discover the Ukrainian positions, and most likely after the Ukrainians revealed their own positions, trying to bring the Russian tank down, the Russians maybe destroyed everything in this area, and most likely after the final clearing operation, the Russians will continue moving further to the north with the purpose to establish complete control over the village. So, to summarize everything, we can make a conclusion that the days of Staromayorsk and Urozhaina are already numbered. Ugledar direction, we have the same activity. FPV drone strikes on Ukrainian positions, on the Ukrainian high-rise constructions. Few more communication equipment were destroyed, few more positions were cleared by the Russians. Just a regular activity without any, let's say, attempts to attack the Ukrainian forces on the ground. But the preparation is ongoing. Very interesting updates are coming from Novomikhailivka. We have that Ukrainians on this side were pretty active, but the Ukrainian activity, first of all, tell us that the Russians were trying most likely to attack the Ukrainians in Konstantinovka along this road, and the Russians were trying to attack the Ukrainians along this road. We will not watch the video due to significant losses among the personnel and soldiers, but the important thing that the Russians were trying to use the moto assault troopers once again, the soldiers on the motorcycles, but lots of motorcycles were destroyed on Ukrainian FPV drone strikes. Now we are moving to the most important update of the previous 24 hours, to Krasnohorivka. We discussed that during the previous few days there were almost no activity in the area, and we didn't know for sure what was the reason of complete absence of any updates. We made the conclusions that maybe the Russians were clearing the area, were trying to dig in deeper. Maybe the Ukrainians managed to stabilize the front line by sending significant reinforcements and reserves to the northern and the northwestern part of the village, of the stronghold, maybe any other reasons, maybe the Russians decided to take operational pause. Very difficult to understand, but we got today more details about the situation. Just a few words. I'll remind you that during the previous months, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the industrial zone in this stronghold, and a few days later we got reports that the Russians managed to establish complete control over House of Minich, this stronghold. We discussed this operation and we got geolocations confirming this. So the Russians were, let's say, attacking Krasnohorivka from two directions, from the southern and from the northeastern. And today we got the final confirmations from different mappers that the Russians somehow managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt, and as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to significantly improve their positions, and according to some mappers, to establish complete control over this territory. Of course, we understand that this is significant progress of the armed force of Russian Federation, and the sources are saying that currently the main clashes in this area are taking place for the central hospital. So this is the high-rise building, the last high-rise building in the north central part of the stronghold, this one, and there are very heavy clashes exactly for this territory. So the Russians are very, very fast, and they understand that if they are able somehow to establish control over the hospital. Furthermore, I'll remind you that currently it's a known situation with the high-rise building along the central street in the vicinity of the gas station, because the last report we have that the Russians capture a few buildings in the area. So if we summarize everything and if we calculate the distance between, let's say, the high-rise buildings along the central street in the vicinity of the gas station and possible Russian positions in the vicinity of the hospital, then we can see that the distance is around 600 meters. So it's nothing. It's already impossible or highly unlikely for the Ukrainians who are currently located in the eastern part and the eastern strongholds to evacuate, let's say, without significant losses. Most likely the Ukrainians who are currently located among these fields, among this high-rise building area and fortifications, already has no chance to evacuate their equipment, their weapon. They can, let's say, evacuate just using their feet and probably without waiting for the order of Ukrainian authorities and Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian officers. So it's already a cauldron. It's already operational encirclement. Let's tell truths to each other. It's already operational encirclement, but every single day the situation can be turned to the complete cauldron. Of course, the Ukrainians still have possibilities to evacuate from the area, to abandon, but without equipment, and I expect that due to the Russian progress in this area, they will do this exactly, let's say, this upcoming night, because if they don't do this, then there are going to be significant problems. They will face significant problems. Now we're moving to Cheretina direction, to the western Avdiivka foothold. We have lots of updates. The Russians continue moving. We have adjusted the map. We got the geolocation confirming that the Russians established complete control over the fields between Solovyova and between Berdichi, so significant progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation. And we have very interesting video that was published by the Ukrainians, by the 47th Mechanized Brigade. On this video we can see the Ukrainian Bradley. This is the Bradley in one corner, in top bottom right corner, Ukrainian Bradley, and in top left corner we can see the Russian tank. And as a result of attack of some, let's say, gun, the Russian tank was destroyed as a result of just one bullet, one missile or one round. Very significantly powerful explosion of powerful weapon and a very accurate attack, and this is what left from the Russian tank. But first, of course, let's discuss in details. The distance between the Ukrainian attack and the Russian position was around 1.5 kilometers, so significant distance for a very accurate attack, obviously. And of course, maybe the Ukrainian soldiers of 47th Mechanized Brigade decided they are immortal, having this best weapon ever, and they were operating along this tree line trying to slow down the Russians. But when the Ukrainians reached this area, most likely that Bradley was destroyed as a result of Russian fire. So the living road of that Bradley was very glorious, but not very long, but very short. So this is the situation in the area. The Ukrainians are saying that there is no defense. The Ukrainians in the Ukrainian investments bypassed this area without even a single dollar invested in the fortifications. So the Ukrainians are not even showing any resistance to the Russians. They're just falling back and losing armored vehicles among the fields. And I'll remind you, if we calculate the level of losses of armored vehicles of the 47th Brigade, the main losses took place exactly in this area. Few Abrams, probably 2 or 3 Abrams were destroyed here, up to maybe 10 Bradleys were destroyed in this area. Let's increase the numbers of this. Yes, just destroyed Abramses and Bradleys on this direction. Significant losses. Now we're moving further to the north. The Russians continue offensive, and as you can see, we have also adjusted the map. We got the first geolocations confirming the Russian positions on the outskirts of Novoalexandrovka. Most likely the Russians also control the fields between Novoalexandrovka and Arkhangelsk, but we haven't received geolocations, so for now we're keeping this area as a gray zone. But once again, I'll repeat myself, most likely this territory is also under complete Russian control. And according to the Ukrainian sources, the Russians currently are moving in a few directions. First direction is to establish control over the stronghold to the north of Sokol. The Russians are moving further along the railways in direction of Gostre, and the Russians, of course, due to the Russian concentration in the area of Novoalexandrovka, are planning to establish complete control, or at least to enter the village of Novoalexandrovka. So most likely we can expect these attacks as well. Today, the Russian sources stated that the forces of 147th Artillery Brigade left Novoalexandrovka. But I'm not surprised with this, because it's artillery brigades. It's not like the forces of 3rd Storm Brigade or Mechanized Brigade or something like this. It's just the infantry that supports artillery left the town. It's normal, because artillery can't be on the zero line. They need to be as far as possible in the safe distance. So that's why we just can make a conclusion based on this statement that Ukrainians are redeploying their artillery as far as possible from the line of combat contact. Nothing more. Now we're moving further to Bakhmut-Artyomovsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we see no changes on the ground, just FPV drone strikes, just additional FAPs arriving in the area, significant number of explosions, significant number of heavy clashes, but without any changes. The thing that we would like to point to attention is some, let's say, activity of the armed forces of Russian Federation in the fields between Ivanovsk and Klishchevka. The Russians are pummeling this area heavily, so we discussed that while the Russians stacked on the eastern block of Chesavyar, the Russians are trying to clear the area, let's say, to the southwest of Ivanovsk, so this one, because there is no towns, no settlements, and the forces of 82nd Air Mobile Division of Armed Forces of Russian Federation can handle with this without any problems just during 1 month or maybe 2. But so this is approximately the next Russian goal, at least for divisions, while the Russians are reducing till ruins the eastern Chesavyar. Sever's direction, no changes, just few artillery strikes and few bombings of the town by the name of Spornaya, just artillery strikes, aviation bombings, nothing special. Southern Kupiansk direction, as we discussed in the previous video, currently this is probably the vital, the decisive period of time for this forest. This is the pain, not just for the Russians but for the Ukrainians as well. Nobody could get any advantages, any, let's say, superiority on the direction, but the time comes. The time has already come, and this time will decide who will control the forest, because as you can see, most of the forest is already covered with the fires, and it's obviously will change the line of combat contact. Now it's important to understand who can use the benefits of the situation and who can't. Most likely the Russians, due to, let's say, significant number of different types of weapon, and if the Russians can catch the initiative during this fires period of time, then of course the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back, and this can lead to complete collapse of entire defense belt, almost till the town by the name of Slavyansk. Southern Kupiansk direction, no changes. Central Kupiansk, we have additional updates. Right before start making the video, most of the mappers, most of the sources reported that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt in the vicinity of the village by the name of Berestove, and to establish, or not to establish, but the clash are taking place right now here. So the Russians cracked the Ukrainian nets and continue moving further either to the west, and now they're going to move further to the south. So this destiny of this, let's say, foothold is going to be resolved during the next few days, maybe even earlier. Kharkiv direction, today we got lots of updates, including FAB strikes, reconnaissance drones operations, a significant number of casualties and explosions, and the most important is that today the Ukrainians stated that the first commanders and reconnaissance teams crossed the border and entered the territory of Ukraine from Belgorod direction. So the first commanders and reconnaissance teams start entering the territory of Ukraine, Kharkiv area, which of course is a very, let's say, important signal that the Russians start preparation with these things, and most likely the Russians will continue development. But from the other side, we got reports that there are just 35,000 soldiers from the Russian side, and obviously 35,000 soldiers are not enough to capture Kharkiv or even to get closer, just to move the front line for another 5 kilometers, and that's it. So today we got report that Lithuania and Baltic states are ready to send soldiers to Ukraine. They understand that according to them, according to their doctrine, if Ukraine falls, then the next target for the Russians is going to be the Baltic states. So for them, it's better to stop or to slow down the Russians in the Ukraine. So that's why most likely they consider this question and to send forces. For example, Austria is not going to join NATO. We got this report today. We got also interesting information that after the visit with France, Xi Jinping is moving to Serbia. He's going to have meeting with the Vucic. They're going to discuss everything, lots of questions, and lots of things will be sent from Xi Jinping to Serbia, from Serbia to Russia. So it's like the club of allies in the, let's say, Central Europe. So it's very interesting to see. Today, Ukraine adopted a very important law. They adopted the law that now they will start and they have the right to mobilize the prisoners without any, let's say, problems and without any, let's say, rejections from their side. And of course the prisoners will be sent as stormtroopers to the most difficult parts of the line of combat contact on the front line. So furthermore, we continue to think updates about the Russians improving their missiles, and so anyway, everything is going to be, and the conflict is going to continue, and so let's wait, let's see. And that's it for this video. Military Summary channel reminds you can condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.